Today we enter the War of Crowns universe. The first book in an upcoming series, A War of Crowns features political intrigue, a fantasy war, dark and vile villains, and a cast of characters ranging from innocently trustworthy to morally gray to self-interested traitors in the making. Ashley Willingham at Ashley Willingham Author is a romance author who writes fantasy with no spice, no swearing, and no graphic violence. Her novels are geared toward adults, so use your own discretion. Welcome to Freytag's Lab, where I review indie and traditionally published books for gripping stories, sensational characters, and clean romance, as well as post some of my own writing ventures. If it's clean, I'll probably read it. The story stars Serafina, the Queen of Elmoria, who has recently come to power after the death of her father, and to many, she is unfit to rule compared to her brother, who died long before. As her country faces war against the Lady Below, a villain from Arath wielding an evil magic that all countries fear, Serafina struggles to find aid to send to one of the country's forts, while also protecting her country's borders. She must consider political marriage, a cop-out in her eyes, with Drakmor, an ally with whom she had already previously broken off a marriage alliance when she was younger. To complicate things, she's also burdened by the reputation of breaking off the marriage for her childhood crush, and a prophecy that seems to show both the destruction of her country and the way to prevent it. As she navigates the alliance, she finds herself married to the Drakmorian king's disowned older brother, recently reinstated as prince by the king for the sole purpose of tormenting Serafina. While Serafina navigates the impending marriage with the morally gray prince, she learns just how to convince him to help her overpower the Drakmorian king while still obtaining the military aid she needs. So, moving on to characters, we have Serafina de la Croix, a queen riding on the coattails of a successful monarch who died in a frenzy after the loss of his son, her brother. Calculated, careful, and under a load of pressure, she tries to gain the aid needed to protect one of the Elmorian forts, since most of her country's military strength is focused on protecting the ports from Arath. She is rightfully resistant towards marrying to gain aid, but will put the well-being of her country at the head of every decision. Next, the Crow, Aldrich Hargrave. Serafina's betrothed and a disinherited Prince of Drakmor, he's always one step away from turning against his brother and much prefers his rightful position as King of Drakmor, or not being king at all. Closed off and scarred, he has no interest in helping Elmoria or taking Elmoria's throne, but the chance to take back the throne from his brother, only at the cost of protecting Elmoria, is appealing enough to result in an alliance with Serafina. Edmund, the King of Drakmor, flirts with the idea of choosing to help the enemy and let Elmoria burn out from under Serafina, his former betrothed. He's arrogant, prideful, and although he, like Serafina, takes pride in his kingdom, he was never going to be an honest, upstanding king, whether Serafina married him or not. He brings about his own destruction as his passive behavior toward the enemy results in too many cracks in the armor. Lord Tiberius is only interested in Serafina as much as she is convenient and beneficial to him. He's wrapped up in his own family's status and is willingly blind to Serafina's suffering should it not serve him. Their childhood friendship turns into a burned bridge as his ill-timed marriage proposal and following guilt trips as Serafina prepares to forge an alliance with Drakmor result in a bitter and petty mindset that haunts Serafina. Oracle Tsukiko, an undeniable good presence so far, gives Serafina a confusing, cryptic prophecy that, if Serafina can decipher, will make or break her attempts to protect Elmoria. Honorable mention goes to Tristan, the only healthy male figure in the book next to Serafina's godfather. He's the only marriage-age man that should be anywhere near women. Anyway. First, the introduction of Serafina and her court, which sets the stage well for the conflicts Serafina faces, not just between her and her enemies, but also within her own home and country. She's not just fighting a literal army from hell, but her own advisors and nobility who are willing to resist her and push their own ideas, even to the detriment of the country. This moment also reveals Serafina's integrity, as well as her family background and emotional scars. She doesn't buckle, she doesn't hold back justified emotional outbursts, and she doesn't tolerate true disrespect from anyone on the court towards herself or the other members. Second, Serafina turning down Tiberius and him revealing the selfish risk he poses to her. Tiberius's proposal is quite forceful, and from her negative response, we learn that he wasn't willing to help Seraphina when she needed it, but now wants to marry her when it's convenient for him. His entitlement to her and assumptive behavior also reveal a very volatile nature masked with pretentious calm that makes him a potential danger in the future. Third is her turning the tables on Edmund and making the marriage alliance her own. Later on in the book, Edmund attempts to humiliate Seraphina by revealing the marriage alliance will be to his disinherited brother, not himself. However, Seraphina quickly finds a way to make the idea her own. She forces Edmund's hand so that he has to offer military aid immediately upon confirming the marriage, or else risk losing face. She gains aid while not fully sacrificing her control over the situation. Fourth is the witches and the reveal of the truly unredeemable and vile evil facing Aworia. In this moment, we learn how the members of the Lady Below's army come to be. Corrupt and selfish mindsets abound, and we learn how witches use special knives to create witch-sworn, or prisoners whose souls they've stolen. Fifth is Seraphina finding a true alliance with the Crow. Seraphina figures out how to speak to what he wants and convince him to help her. Of course, there are more amazing plot moments sprinkled throughout, but I won't spoil the whole book. Now, major themes. The theme of integrity. Seraphina refuses to take the easy way out or sell herself to get results. While she could easily bow her head and yield power to a husband out of desperation, she refuses to take the risk of surrendering her country's well-being to a stranger. The Crow, in spite of his misaligned moral compass, is not without standards and holds himself to a code of integrity of who is and isn't acceptable to kill. There's also a theme of evil. The enemy in the story is completely evil and irreverently destructive. Those who are weak and work with the enemy due to fear are swallowed up entirely by evil, and those who work willingly are unredeemable and undeniably in the wrong. Passiveness toward the evil is shown to be a sign of weak character and an inevitable death sentence. Even where morally gray is concerned, characters don't cross the line until they assist or surrender to the evil. For pacing and unanswered questions, this story was extremely impressive because in truth there are 4 different groups being covered throughout the book. The group stuck at the fort, which we visit sparingly and see the progress of the enemy. The main group with Seraphina, where the main story takes place, Edmund and his grey corruptible group, and the Lady Below's group, where we learn exactly how one is overtaken by the villain's power and why the villain is so dangerous. The balancing act of introducing information and showing why it matters was extremely well done. The breaks away from the main story to show the reader either the condition of the fort, the activity of Edmund, or the activity of the villain contributed to the story and made for an expansive, complex world with deeply intertwined events. Multi-point of view stories run the risk of being a way to either dump information or repeat information when the author can't figure out a way to move the story forward. However, each chapter kept the story progressing and added information in a measured and natural sequence. As far as unanswered questions, truly I have none. Near the end of the book, one of the characters seems on the brink of betraying Seraphina for their own well-being, and obviously Seraphina's tentative, genuine alliance with the Crow only begs the question of what happens next. For the 4-point rating. Positive messages and positive role models. Seraphina is of course a positive role model for her aforementioned integrity and selflessness. She isn't a pushover, but she also isn't unfairly cruel. The well-being of her country comes first. She refuses to take the easy way at the expense of her dignity, but she also doesn't put her pride ahead of making the best decision. For cursing, none, as advertised. For drinking and drugs, there was minimal drinking because this is a medieval-esque kind of setting with adult characters, but nothing excessive. For spice, the witches, by nature of being sleazy and villainous, are seductive and a little handsy with their victims, but nothing extreme. One character is backed into a corner by the witch and has his chest exposed, and then gets stabbed. One of Seraphina's suitors gets a little up close when proposing to her, and is very pushy and blocks her in. Edmund, when dancing with Seraphina, gets touchy and takes advantage of her low-back dress, but ultimately causes her pain and keeps her locked in his arms against her will. Seraphina has the reputation of an illicit affair, which isn't true, being the reason for breaking off her prior engagement. One man tells another that he should just buy a wife. Another man mentions that he's looking at the women of a particular country he's visiting as a pleasant way to pass the time. You get the idea. These are presented as negative events, of course, and certainly not painted as any sort of ideal for a relationship. For my final recommendation, I enjoyed A War of Crowns. I became very invested in the happenings of the universe and seeing the outcome of Serafina's story. I look forward to the next book in the series. I give A War of Crowns 5 stars. My only gripe, which I will expand upon in a later video, is that I hope Serafina doesn't choose any of the men currently pursuing her hand, because they're all unhealthy. Anyway, A War of Crowns is a complex and expansive world with cultural, racial, religious, and political tensions, a cast of unique and multifaceted characters, and an evil that feels like darkness come to life. I'll leave the link to Ashley Willingham's account and her book on Amazon in the comments. Please like, subscribe, comment, and check out A War of Crowns.